think sometimes when we don't have a plan for the worst case scenario, we're afraid to push our students and to expect more from them because we don't want to upset them to the point that we've taken them over the edge. But it limits us because we are not helping the student reach their full potential. So I think the way to approach it is to have a plan for what would we do in a worst case scenario. And one plan that we have used with some schools is where we have a team approach, and we'll have one person who is designated as the person who's just going to make sure the student is safe, one who's designated as the distractioner, and they're going to go find something that will help the child calm down. And then the third one is crowd control, someone who's going to make sure that the other students are out doing something else and that there's not a lot of people watching if there's a problem. Okay, we all need to know when we need a break, right? If we all were better at recognizing our own limitations, we would probably have a much happier world. So learning when to recognize when you've reached a point where it's time for you to step back is a good skill for all students to have. Your students with autism are especially at risk because they're often overwhelmed by emotions. Something that might not be important to you is devastating to them. And so we can't always predict what's going to upset them. So we need them to build the skill themselves where they can tell when they're getting overstimulated or over emotional. It's often helpful to identify activities that we know are difficult for students and then give them a break before that activity happens. So instead of hoping for the best and hoping they'll be able to make it through the whole activity, give them 10 minutes of a quiet time or something that's sort of relaxing before you launch into that difficult math assignment or before they go to lunch where it's loud and chaotic. And your student is going to be more likely to have a successful experience because they're in a better emotional spot. Students with autism often are still learning to learn, even in much older grades. So sometimes, even though math is on the agenda, what the student really needs is some life skills in terms of frustration tolerance and persisting when things are difficult, and communicating with others about how frustrated they are and getting support in those moments is a really important life skill as well. So there might be some weeks where instead of teaching math, you're going to help teach frustration tolerance. You're going to present a math worksheet, and the student is going to say, that is overwhelming to me, and they're going to ask for a break, and you're going to say, sure, you can have a break. And then the student is not going to do math. Lots of teachers would say, well, then why would I keep presenting them math? They need to start learning their math. But what you're going to teach them for a few weeks is how to tolerate frustration. And so you're going to present math, they're going to ask for a break, they get a break. And you're going to present math again, they're going to ask for a break, they get a break. They're learning to trust that when they ask for a break, they're going to get a break. So many times in the classroom, students say they're frustrated and we continue to push them. Sometimes that's good because the student really can push through, they just didn't realize they could push through. But our kids with autism, often what they need more help with is communicating that they need a break. They sometimes don't even recognize when they need a break. So if they did and they were able to communicate about it, that's a great success for them. Let's reinforce that by giving them a break. Once they can trust that letting people know how they're feeling is helpful to them, then we can take it to the next step where we're having them push through when it's difficult because they know we're on their side and they know that we're going to work with them. We're not going to push them so far that they go over the edge. So a lot of education is dealing with behavior problems. And when you're educating people with disabilities, it's compounded by the fact that sometimes there's a behavior and sometimes there's also a disability. So many times there's two ways you have to approach things. For example, there's a mantra among behaviorists that behavior is behavior is behavior. And that's true to a certain extent. But sometimes a behavior is a manifestation of a disability. And there are situations in which if you could approach the disability instead of the behavior, you might get a more efficient response and a better outcome. For example, kids with autism often have a hard time with changes in routine. And sometimes they can get very distressed when there's a change in the routine. A strictly behavioral approach would look at that and say, let's reinforce his calm behavior and let's have consequences for disruptive behavior. So every time there's a change in routine and he's calm, he's going to earn some points. And every time there's a change and he's disruptive, he's going to lose points. That would be a strictly behavioral approach. That might be effective, but there might be an even faster way to get at the problem. We know kids with autism have a hard time with transitions, and we know that if we provide them a written schedule of what's about to happen, they can use that to help themselves understand what's going to happen. And you can immediately get to a situation where the child is able to tolerate changes in their routine because they can understand them. And then you've approached that disruptive behavior from a disability perspective rather than a behavior perspective. You're probably going to get to the better place faster.